Jacob Fatu just proved he's nothing but a coward, and I'm about to show you exactly why his reaction to Hikuleo's backstage confrontation at SmackDown was the most embarrassing moment in recent WWE history. If you think you know what happened, you're wrong. The footage they didn't show you tells a completely different story, and frankly, it makes Jacob Fatu look like a complete joke who doesn't deserve to be in the same ring as real warriors like Hikuleo. But before I expose this fraud for what he really is, let me ask you something. When did WWE fans start accepting mediocrity? When did we start cheering for someone who runs away from confrontation instead of facing it head-on? Because that's exactly what Jacob Fatu did, and if you disagree with me, you're living in denial. What went down backstage at SmackDown wasn't just a heated exchange between two Samoan powerhouses. It was a complete character assassination of Jacob Fatu that WWE tried desperately to cover up. Hikuleo, making his surprise appearance at the arena, didn't come to play games or engage in typical WWE backstage politics. He came with a mission, and that mission was to call out Jacob Fatu for what he really is, a pretender wearing the mask of a warrior. The confrontation started when Hikuleo approached Fatu near the catering area, where Jacob was casually eating with some of the lower card talent. Already, this tells you everything you need to know about Fatu's mindset. While real champions are preparing for battle, studying tape, or working on their craft, Jacob Fatu is socializing with jobbers like he's at a company picnic. Hikuleo walked up to that table and said something that immediately changed the entire atmosphere. According to multiple sources who witnessed the encounter, Hikuleo looked Jacob dead in the eyes and said, "You call yourself the Samoan werewolf, but you're just a house pet pretending to be wild." The silence that followed was deafening. Now, any real warrior, any legitimate tough guy, would have stood up immediately and addressed that disrespect. But what did Jacob Fatu do? He froze. He actually froze like a deer in headlights, looking around the room as if he was hoping someone else would handle the situation for him. What happened next was so embarrassing that WWE's cameras conveniently malfunctioned during the most crucial part of the confrontation. But I've spoken to people who were there, and their accounts paint a picture of Jacob Fatu that his fans absolutely do not want to accept. Instead of standing up to defend his reputation, Jacob Fatu actually tried to de-escalate the situation by laughing it off. He made some weak joke about family disagreements and suggested they talk about it like adults. Are you kidding me? This is the same man who's been portrayed as this unstoppable force of nature, this savage beast who destroys everything in his path, and when faced with real confrontation, he wants to have a civilized conversation. Hikuleo wasn't having any of it. He stepped closer to Fatu and said, "You've been hiding behind Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa for so long, you've forgotten what it means to stand on your own 2 feet. The accusation hit like a sledgehammer because everyone in that room knew it was true. Jacob Fatu's entire WWE career has been built on association with the bloodline. Without that connection, without that family name, what exactly has he accomplished? Where are his signature victories? Where are the moments that define him as an individual competitor rather than just another member of a famous wrestling family?" But Hikuleo wasn't finished destroying Jacob Fatu's reputation. He brought up something that cuts to the very core of what it means to be a warrior in their culture. He challenged Fatu's legitimacy not just as a wrestler, but as a representative of their family heritage. "Our ancestors were warriors who faced their enemies head-on," Hikuleo continued, his voice carrying throughout the backstage area. "They didn't hide behind group tactics or family politics. They fought with honor, with courage, with respect for the battle itself. You've brought shame to that legacy." Those words should have ignited a fire in Jacob Fatu that couldn't be contained. Any man worth his salt would have exploded with righteous anger and demanded satisfaction right then and there. But Jacob Fatu's response was to actually take a step backward. He physically retreated from the confrontation, creating distance between himself and Hikuleo like he was afraid of what might happen next. The other wrestlers in the area were watching this unfold, and you could see the disbelief on their faces. This was Jacob Fatu, the man who's been presented as this unstoppable monster, literally backing down from a verbal confrontation with someone who had just called him out publicly. Instead of manning up and addressing Hikuleo's challenges directly, Jacob Fatu started making excuses. He mumbled something about not being worth his time and having bigger priorities than family drama. These are the words of a coward, plain and simple. When you're called out by someone from your own family, someone who shares your bloodline and your cultural heritage, you don't get to dismiss it as drama. You don't get to act like you're above the confrontation when your entire reputation is being questioned. You certainly don't get to pretend that defending your honor isn't worth your time. But that's exactly what Jacob Fatu did, and it was pathetic to witness. He tried to turn the situation around by suggesting that Hikuleo was jealous of his WWE success, that this was all about attention-seeking and trying to ride his coattails into a WWE contract. Hikuleo's response shut down that narrative immediately. "I don't want your spot," he said. "I want you to prove you deserve it. Because right now, you're just another guy who got lucky with family connections." That statement hit Jacob Fatu like a freight train because it voiced what so many wrestling fans have been thinking but were afraid to say. How much of Jacob Fatu's success is actually earned, and how much of it is simply the result of being born into the right family? Here's what really happened in that backstage confrontation that WWE doesn't want you to know. Jacob Fatu was completely unprepared for someone to challenge him outside of the scripted WWE environment. He's become so comfortable with his protected position within the company that he's forgotten how to handle real confrontation. When Hikuleo pressed him about his individual accomplishments, Jacob Fatu couldn't provide a satisfactory answer. When challenged about his warrior credentials, he deflected instead of standing firm. When questioned about his worthiness to represent their family legacy, he made excuses instead of proving his worthiness through action. The most telling moment came when Hikuleo asked him directly, "If you had to face me one-on-one, with no family backup, no WWE politics, no corporate protection, would you be confident in your ability to represent yourself?" Jacob Fatu's response was to look away and mutter something about not playing games. That's not the response of a confident warrior. That's the response of someone who knows they've been exposed and doesn't have the courage to face the truth. Jacob Fatu has been living off his family's reputation for so long that he's forgotten what it means to earn respect through his own actions. What happened after the confrontation was even more revealing than the confrontation itself. Instead of using the encounter as motivation to prove his worth, Jacob Fatu immediately went into damage control mode. He started reaching out to people backstage, trying to get them to corroborate his version of events. He complained to WWE management about Hikuleo's presence at the arena, suggesting that unauthorized personnel shouldn't be allowed backstage. Think about that for a moment. A man who calls himself a warrior is literally trying to use corporate bureaucracy to protect himself from future confrontations. Jacob Fatu also started spreading his own narrative about the encounter, claiming that Hikuleo was disrespectful and unprofessional. He tried to paint himself as the victim in the situation, as if he was the one who had been wronged rather than the one who had been challenged to step up and prove his worth. This behavior is characteristic of someone who knows they've been exposed and is desperately trying to control the narrative before the truth gets out. A confident, legitimate warrior would have used the confrontation as fuel for future battles, not as an excuse to play politics and avoid accountability. If you look at Jacob Fatu's entire WWE career, this backstage confrontation with Hikuleo fits into a larger pattern of avoidance and deflection. When has Jacob Fatu ever truly stood on his own and proven his worth without the support of his family or faction? Every major victory he's had has come with assistance. Every significant moment in his career has been built around group dynamics rather than individual excellence. Even his signature moves and finishing sequences are designed to work in tandem with other members of the bloodline rather than showcasing his unique abilities. The Hikuleo confrontation exposed this pattern because it was the first time Jacob Fatu was forced to defend himself without backup, without preparation, without the comfortable structure of WWE's scripted environment. And when put in that position, he crumbled. This isn't just about one backstage incident. It's about the fundamental question of who Jacob Fatu really is when stripped of all the artificial support systems that have defined his career. Based on his reaction to Hikuleo's challenge, the answer is deeply disappointing. What makes Jacob Fatu's reaction even more shameful is the cultural context that Hikuleo was addressing. In Samoan culture, when your honor is challenged, especially by family, you don't get to walk away. You don't get to make excuses. You don't get to hide behind corporate policies or political maneuvering. You face the challenge head-on, with courage and dignity, regardless of the outcome. The battle itself is what matters, not whether you win or lose. The willingness to stand up and defend your name, your family, your legacy, that's what defines a warrior in their cultural tradition. Jacob Fatu's refusal to engage with Hikuleo's challenge wasn't just cowardly, it was culturally disrespectful. He dishonored not just himself, but the entire tradition that he claims to represent. When you call yourself the Samoan werewolf, you're making a statement about your connection to warrior culture. But when you back down from a legitimate challenge, you're proving that connection is nothing but marketing. Hikuleo understood this, which is why his words cut so deep. He wasn't just challenging Jacob Fatu as a wrestler, he was challenging him as a representative of their shared heritage. And Jacob Fatu's response proved that he's unworthy of that representation. This brings us to the bigger question that every wrestling fan needs to ask themselves: why are we accepting this level of mediocrity? Why are we cheering for someone who can't even handle a backstage confrontation without falling apart? Jacob Fatu has been presented to WWE fans as this unstoppable force, this dangerous wild man who can't be contained. But when faced with real confrontation, real challenge, real pressure, he revealed himself to be nothing more than a carefully constructed character with no substance behind the presentation. We deserve wrestlers who can back up their personas with genuine toughness, genuine courage, genuine warrior spirit. We deserve performers who don't crumble when their carefully controlled environment is disrupted by real challenges. The fact that Jacob Fatu's reaction to Hikuleo's confrontation was so pathetic should be a wake-up call for WWE fans. We've been sold a bill of goods, and it's time to demand better. It's time to stop accepting pretenders and start supporting real warriors who can handle themselves both in and out of the ring. Jacob Fatu's shocking reaction to Hikuleo's backstage confrontation wasn't just embarrassing, it was revelatory. It pulled back the curtain on who he really is beneath all the hype, all the family connections, all the carefully crafted WWE presentation. What we saw was a man who talks tough when he's protected but crumbles when faced with real challenge. A man who claims warrior heritage but refuses to honor warrior traditions. A man who benefits from family reputation but can't live up to family standards. Hikuleo exposed Jacob Fatu as a fraud, and Jacob Fatu's reaction proved that the exposure was accurate. Until he's willing to face that reality and do something about it, he remains nothing more than a disappointment wearing the mask of a warrior. The wrestling world is watching, and Jacob Fatu's credibility is on the line. His reaction to Hikuleo's confrontation has already done massive damage to his reputation. The question now is whether he has the courage to prove his critics wrong, or whether he'll continue down the path of avoidance and excuses that has defined his response so far. Based on what we've seen, the answer seems clear. Jacob Fatu is all bark and no bite, and it's time for wrestling fans to acknowledge that reality and demand better from their supposed heroes. What do you think? Am I being too harsh on Jacob Fatu, or is it time someone finally called him out for what he really is? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs to see the truth about Jacob Fatu's embarrassing reaction to real confrontation. The wrestling world deserves to know who their heroes really are when the cameras stop rolling and the real tests begin. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Wrestling News CC family, where the real stories of WWE come to life. See you in the next one.